Hello and welcome to this discussion on the EU taxonomy regulation. Now we will focus on how the taxonomy impacts financial companies. And with me to discuss this I have Emilia Jorander Delleborn, who is a sustainable finance legal expert here at Swedbank. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Good to have you. Swedbank is a financial company, but so are also some of our customers. So how are we and our customers impacted by the taxonomy? What do we need to do?
So in general, financial companies are impacted a bit differently than non-financial companies. For example, apart from some insurance and reinsurance activities, no financial activities are included in the technical screening criteria for the taxonomy. Instead, what is the focus for financial companies is their exposures to other activities. So exposures through their investments or through the lending, for example. And then also there are disclosure requirements for financial companies. So also they're relevant for financial companies.
Okay, so financial companies need to report under the taxonomy. But what are the requirements, on the disclosure requirements then? What are those?
Well, it differs a bit depending on what type of financial company you are and which kind of service you provide. So, for example, the first type of disclosure, that is for financial companies that needs to include information on taxonomy in their sustainability report. Mm-hmm. So the first type. And then the second type, that is for financial companies that are financial market participants that need to include information on taxonomy for their financial products.
Okay, so different types of disclosure requirements then.
Exactly.
But could a company then be required to comply with both types?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
But I think in order to elaborate more on that response, I think we should maybe go into what the different types actually mean.
That sounds like a good idea. Which financial companies need to disclose information then on the taxonomy in their sustainability report?
Well, the criteria for when a company needs to include information in the sustainability report is the same for financial companies as it is for non-financial companies, with one exemption. And that is in relation to the criteria of when a company is of public interest. So a financial company, for example, insurance companies and credit institutions, those are also companies of public interest. But apart from that, the criteria are the same. And as we do go into them in details in the video for non-financial companies, if you want to know more on the details, I would recommend you to have a look at that video.
Okay, good. Okay, but for financial companies then that need to include information on the taxonomy in their sustainability report, what exactly do they need to report on?
Well, again, I feel like I say often, it depends on, but it depends on which kind of financial company you are. So there's different requirements for banks, for example, compared to insurance companies. But what they have in common is that they all focus on their exposures. Okay,
so but maybe you could give an example of this. And as Swedbank is mainly a bank, perhaps a bank as an example.
Good suggestion, Matthias. So for banks, for example, they need to include information on numeric information in relation to some main KPIs. And those KPIs are on balance sheet exposures. And for banks, that is mainly lending portfolio. But also there's a KPI for off-balance sheet exposures, and that is for financial guarantees, but also assets under management. And then another KPI is for fees and commissions that do not relate to lending and asset management. So for example, for a bank, it could be, fees and commission in relation to payment services. And then lastly, a KPI for trading book. So there's some numeric information to disclose, but then there's also some qualitative information. And that could be how is the taxonomy impacting the business strategy of a bank, and how does it impact their customer meetings and when they develop new products. And this qualitative information, that is the same for all financial companies. So both, numeric, but also strategic information.
Okay. Talking about the taxonomy, I've also heard the abbreviation GAR being mentioned. What does that stand for? What is GAR?
So I mentioned some KPIs now as main KPIs, but I would say the main KPI is the one for on-balance sheet exposure. That is also called GAR, or Green Asset Ratio, which is the full name. And that shows taxonomy-aligned assets to total covered assets. And total covered assets is total assets excluding exposures to central governments, central banks, supranational issuers, and the trading book.
A lot of information then to disclose in the sustainability report. When is a financial company to report on all of this? Or is it the same timeline as for non-financial companies?
It differs a bit between financial companies and non-financial companies. It was the same for the report of 2021, so the one that most companies have already reported on. Both non-financial companies and financial companies reported on eligibility solely, so this more simplified report. But while non-financial companies, they will start to report next year, so for the 2022, they will start to report on taxonomy alignment. But financial undertakings, we start to report in 2 years, so for 2023. And the reason why we do it 1 year later is because we report on our exposure, so we need to have data from the other companies to be able to report ourselves. And then there are some transitional dates also after that. For example, for banks, the KPI for trading book and for fees and commission, as I mentioned before, those we start to report on first for the year of 2025.
Now, I would like to know about the other types of disclosure. This was relevant to something called financial market participants. Who are they?
So financial market participants, that is the entities that manufacture financial products. And you might wonder, what is a financial product? And without going into the nitty-gritty details, a financial product is a fund or a savings insurance product or a pension product or portfolio management service. So it could be a company, or typical companies would be fund companies or insurance companies or banks or investment firms.
Okay. And these types of companies also need to disclose information under the taxonomy. How does these requirements then differ from the first type?
Well, these companies, just first mention what they are more to disclose on, because these companies are already subject to a regulation called Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, abbreviated as SFDR. So we have another abbreviation in there. And that regulation requires the products to disclose information on sustainability for each financial product. So taxonomy adds requirements here. So also for each financial product, you need to include information on taxonomy. So the difference there, to answer your question, between the two is the first type of disclosure is focusing on the entity or the group disclosure. While we come to this type of disclosure, we are focusing on the financial product itself.
Oh, okay. But what is it then that these companies need to report on a product basis?
Well, it differs a bit depending on which kind of financial product we talk about and the sustainability profile of the financial product. So if we have a financial product that has no sustainability profile at all, then that product needs to include information on for their investments. They do not take into account the taxonomy.
Okay.
But for other financial products that have a sustainability profile in some kind of way, and this includes also those that promote environmental characteristics, they need to include information on, if they have investments in taxonomy-aligned investments and for which objective, for example, and if they have any ambitions in relation to this. So for both financial products, independent of, you are to disclose this information in the pre-contractual disclosure and also in the periodic report.
Oh, okay. But when then can we expect this information to be provided for financial products?
Well, they should already have started to provide this information, as the first date was 1st of Jan 2022. However, for 1st Jan of 2023, it will come more detailed requirements. So from that date, we can expect to see more of a harmonized disclosures. But as we mentioned before, financial, non-financial companies, they will not have reported on their taxonomy alignment by 1st of Jan 2023. No. So there is a data gap here But of course, as with everything on taxonomy, it will be better in time.
Yeah, it is evolving.
It is.
But if I could then go back to a question I asked you earlier, could you give us an example of when a company falls within both types of disclosures?
Yeah, so an example could be a large insurance company that is also offering savings insurance products. They would need to include information on a entity or group level in their sustainability report for taxonomy. And then they also need to include information for their financial product in relation to taxonomy, so both for periodic, pre-contractual disclosure and periodic for that product.
Okay. Thank you, Emilia, then, for these clarifications.
Thank you.
And also thank you to you who has watched this discussion. We hope it has provided you with more information about how the taxonomy will impact financial companies. If you would like to know more about how the taxonomy impacts non-financial companies, don't forget to watch our video on that as well. Thank you for watching.